There are signs that his patience is running out. He's threatened tariffs a couple of times on Russia. We don't know how serious that is. But it was interesting, I think, that today he did say that three people were responsible for the war, and he went on to list them as actually said firstly Putin,
Yeah.
and then he changed his mind a bit. Then he said, well, but let's say Biden, and number two Zelensky. So he is bracketing Putin with Zelensky there.
Talk us through the meeting. They are allies. This is Donald Trump's opportunity to double down on something which helped him win the election. This is a popular topic for him and his supporters, David.
Absolutely, especially closing up the border, which was a disaster under Joe Biden's presidency. And almost nobody is coming across at the moment. And one of the reasons is probably the deterrence effect of being rounded up and sent to an El Salvadorian mega prison, where President Bukele is a big fan of Trump. They're mutual fans, I would say. Listeners may know he describes himself as the coolest dictator in the world. He's a young, smartly dressed guy who has locked up 84,000 of his own people who are accused or convicted of being gang members, dramatically reduced crime, and has a very high popularity rating in El Salvador, apparently. The Oval Office was the scene of a bit of a love-in between them today, when one of the questions came from CNN, which is, of course, disparaged and despised by Trump as a liberal news network, asking about an El Salvadorian man who is married to an American and has a 5-year-old American child, who was one of the 238 men packed off to a mega jail out of America, all migrants who cross the border illegally into America. But this guy not only denies that he's a gang member, but had earned a work permit in America in 2019, and obviously leaves behind a family, and was actually under a court order protecting him from returning to El Salvador under threat of reprisals from gangs, because he says that's the reason he fled the country. So this is a mess that was put to Trump by CNN in the White House, and he said, after criticizing CNN a little bit, he then said that he would follow the Supreme Court's order in America to facilitate the return of this man, but there was nothing else he could do about it because he was El Salvadorian and he was back in El Salvador. So the baton was passed to President Bukele, and who in similar fashion replied it was a preposterous question to ask him to release this guy who was a terrorist, who was safely locked up in his country. So that man is not going anywhere. The campaign to release him that's been running in America is seemingly going nowhere, as both Trump and Bukele doubled down on keeping him locked up.
Trump's comments to Bukele, homegrowns are next. The homegrowns, you've got to build about 5 more places. It's not big enough. This appears to be kind of off camera or off mic, or perhaps when they're mic'd up, but they're not really kind of officially meant to be talking. So this could be an off mic comment. But what does Trump mean by this? Homegrowns are next.
So we'd heard speculation for a few weeks, actually, that Trump wants to send US citizens to the El Salvador mega prisons, where you may have seen videos which are often tweeted by President Bukele himself, actually, of the prisoners arriving and having their heads shaved and all being dressed in these white outfits and made to sit in long rows on the floor. They look like pretty harsh places. And Trump went on to talk about how we have terrible people in America, people who creep up behind you on the train platform and push you off, or creep up behind old ladies and hit them with baseball bats. These are absolute monsters. I'd like to include them in the group of people to get them out of the country. But then he deferred to Pam Bondi, his Attorney General, and said, you'll have to be looking into that. You'll have to look into the law on that. We'll follow the law, he said. Pam Bondi, of course, is known as an absolutely fierce Trump loyalist, the former Attorney General of Florida, who's now the Attorney General of America. So he wants to do it, but it would create a massive human rights protest, I think, if he tried to, even for the worst of the worst American criminals.
Yeah. Okay, let's just do a couple of minutes on the Sumy attack, so Russia's ballistic missile attack on Sumy. Trump took to Truth Social, called the attack a mistake. He gave those comments aboard Air Force One. He's also sort of doubled down on his assertion that it's Zelensky's fault. He's also added Biden and Putin into that, which is stuff that we've heard from him before. But a senior Ukrainian MP called for an FBI investigation into Russian influence in the White House. Here is Alexander Merezhko, chairman of the Ukrainian Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee, speaking to Times Radio this morning.
He said that it was a mistake. You know, to me, it was a shocking statement because it was not a mistake. You cannot have mistake on daily basis. This is serious war crime, and we expect a different reaction from American president.
Yeah, I mean, we heard some sort of textbook Trump, didn't we? There's not going to be an investigation into the White House and potentially Russian influence there, is there, David? Where does this one go next? He's asked about it a lot. Not a lot appears to be moving or changing at the moment.
No, the very last thing the FBI will do under Kash Patel, the
exactly.
Trump's nominee, is investigate Trump for something like this, because, of course, the investigations into the Trump campaign's link to Russia were the big furore of the first term, and that's ended up in Trump claiming victory because we had a big inquiry by a former FBI director, actually, and that didn't prove the case of any direct links between the Trump campaign and Russian election interference. No direct links, we should say. That is not water under the bridge to Trump, who frequently refers to the Russia hoax. Talks of the way that President Putin went through it with him, as if they were together on the same side in a battle against the liberal establishment that was, of course, trying to investigate Trump at the time. So that's not only going nowhere, it fuels Trump's sympathy towards President Putin in some ways, because he thinks they went through something together, a Russia hoax on them. And it really sounded a lot like the Russian explanation for the latest attacks, known as the Palm Sunday attacks now, that this was a mistaken targeting of civilians and wasn't intended. We do hear a lot of excuses made for Putin by Trump as he tries to cajole him to the table, but there are signs that his patience is running out. He's threatened tariffs a couple of times on Russia. We don't know how serious that is, but it was interesting, I think, that today he did say that 3 people were responsible for the war, and he went on to list them as actually said firstly Putin, and then he changed his mind a bit. Then he said, well, but let's say Biden, and number 2, Zelensky. So he is bracketing Putin with Zelensky there in the cause in the war. But he did also, just a couple of minutes earlier, he again referred in passing to Zelensky as starting the war, because someone had said to him, well, are you going to send some more missiles to Ukraine? And Trump had said, you don't start a war with somebody that's 20 times your size and then hope people give you some missiles. So that really betrays who he seems to think started the war.
Yeah. Scotch theory there. Look, thank you so much for being with us, David. Always appreciate it. It is the Trump Dump. You've been hearing from David Charter, the Times assistant US editor. And not only can you see live blogging from David and the team over in the States, you can also see daily reports on the comings and goings of Donald Trump, where we are with tariffs, etc. I would recommend checking out David on thetimes.com and on the app as well. David Charter, thank you. Now, it is 8:49. What actually is inheritance tax and will it affect you? And why are Britain's farmers so furious about it? On the Feel Better About Money